This man claimed he could kill her to 800 yards, the prosecutor said, with no hesitation. The jury didn't blink. The defendant just stared forward. No lawyer, no defense, no excuse. Everyone thought they knew what he was, a bitter ex-Marine, a threat. Until a black SUV pulled up outside. Until a four-star general walked in and said, "That man saved my life. And the court is about to convict the wrong person." What happened next silenced the entire courtroom. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The courtroom was small. Red brick walls, wooden pews polished by decades of elbows and nervous hands. You could hear the hum of the ceiling fan even when the judge entered. That's how quiet it was. My desk was near the front court clerk, 6 years and counting. I've seen all kinds pass through this room: shoplifters, broken families, bar fights that got out of hand. But that morning was different. He came in cuffed, shackled. Actually, hands bound in front, heavy chain wrapped around his waist like some ancient criminal. Daniel Riggs, 66, retired Marine. That's all it said on the docket. He didn't say a word, didn't glance at the gallery, didn't look toward the jury box, just stared straight ahead as the bailiff guided him to the defense table like he'd walked that path before. The whispering started before the judge even sat down. "That's the guy from the bump station, right? He threatened to shoot someone, 800 yards or something. I heard he snapped, PTSD. Maybe, I'll be honest with you, I believe most of it. He looked like the kind of man who had seen too much and didn't come back all the way. Weathered face, sharp scar cutting across his jawline. Wore the same faded jeans and canvas shirt at every hearing. Always early, always alone, no lawyer of his own. Just a tired public defender who barely looked up from her folder. No family in the gallery. No character witnesses. No one. And yet, he didn't look lost, or scared, or angry. He looked done. Not defeated, just done. The judge arrived. We all stood. She gave her usual nod and told the bailiff to proceed. Prosecution was fast to start. They always are when they think it's an easy case. The incident was described as minor but disturbing, a verbal confrontation at a local gas station. A younger man claimed Riggs had used military terminology to intimidate, told him he could take him out from 800 yards. No scope, no weapon was drawn, no injury reported, but the phrase stuck. 800 yards. You could feel the weight of it land in the jury's chest, especially coming from someone like him. A Marine, a sniper. They whispered. The store clerk gave vague testimony, said Riggs was quiet but intense. A woman who claimed to overhear said she remembered hearing him mutter something about killing, but no recordings, no video. Still, fear travels fast. The prosecutor delivered his closing like it was theater. "This man may have served," he said, pacing dramatically. "But that was a long time ago. We respect the uniform. Ladies and gentlemen, we do. But we do not excuse behavior like this. Intimidation is not patriotism, and silence is not innocence." Some of the jurors nodded, others looked away, and Daniel Riggs, he didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't even look at the man condemning him. He just stared ahead, that same distant look in his eyes, like he was waiting for something none of us could see. The judge gave instructions. The jury left the room. The bailiff removed the cuffs temporarily, a courtesy, but the chain remained around his waist, metal clinking against the bench as he shifted. I looked at him, really looked, for the first time, and what I saw wasn't a danger. It was calm, heavy, still calm. Not the kind that comes from confidence, the kind that comes from having nothing left to prove. Around the room, phones buzzed. One reporter near the back tapped frantically at her laptop. A few locals sat in the gallery, curious but not concerned. To most, this was just another petty case, another tired old man with a grudge. But me, I started to feel something else, like the verdict wasn't going to be the most important thing that happened in that room. Like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one waiting for something. And I remember it clear as day, right before the jury returned. Right before everything changed. The door at the back of the courtroom creaked open, and a shadow stepped through. Not just any man, a four-star general, and he wasn't alone. Not this time, not today. It started with a sound, not loud, just a slow creak of the courtroom door open. At first, no one turned. We'd all heard doors open before latecomers, reporters, a clerk back from lunch, but then came the hush, the kind of silence that moves through a room like a slow wave, pressing down on every breath. I looked up, and I saw him. Tall, straight-backed. His uniform was flawless, deep navy blue with sharp silver trim. 4 stars gleamed on each shoulder. Not the kind you buy at the surplus store, a real general. He paused at the threshold, eyes scanning the room, not in confusion, not searching. He already knew exactly where to go. The judge froze mid-sentence. The jury, just returning, stopped in their tracks, mouths slightly open. The prosecutor blinked, then stood slowly, like he wasn't sure if he was being pranked. I'd never seen a room so still. And then the general stepped forward. His boots didn't thud. They didn't stomp. They whispered. Controlled, steady, authority wrapped in silence. He wasn't alone. Behind him, maybe a step back, walked a man in his early 50s. Civilian clothes, soft flannel, denim jeans, leather shoes scuffed from real use. No flash, no badge, but his eyes said he'd seen something that never left. They made their way down the center aisle. The general didn't look at the prosecutor, not the jury, not even the judge. At first, he walked straight toward Daniel Riggs. And that's when Riggs moved for the first time that day. Just a slight lift of the chin. Their eyes met, no smile, no nod, but something passed between them. Something you don't need words for. The general stopped at the defense table, his hands clasped behind his back. The judge cleared her throat, standing slowly. General, may I ask your business in this courtroom? He turned, respectfully. His voice, when it came, was calm, deep, carried without force. I'm here on behalf of the man seated before you, Your Honor. He gestured to Riggs without looking at him. This court may not know his full name, but I do. Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Riggs, retired, United States Marine Corps, former sniper attached to Task Force Iron Dagger. The room stirred. The jury glanced around, uncertain. I saw a woman on the back row press her hand to her chest. The general continued, 31 years ago, outside Fallujah, my team was pinned down. 7 Marines, 2 wounded, radio dead, surrounded, nightfall approaching. Our last known coordinates were already compromised. He paused. I was a young major then, green, barely 30, and I was ready to die in that rubble. His voice grew softer, but then came the shots. Not panic, not chaos, precision. One by one, 12 enemy combatants dropped, every single one of them placed cleanly. No wasted movement, no crossfire, just silence in safety, a beat of stillness. That man saved us, all of us. He looked back at Riggs. He didn't ask for medals, didn't wait for thanks. He disappeared after the evac, never said a word. Then he faced the room again. I owe him my life. You could have heard a pin drop. But then he said something that made my stomach tighten. I didn't come here today just to talk about the past. He turned and placed a hand gently on the shoulder of the man who had walked in with him. This is Matthew Dunley, the general said. He was there that day at the gas station. A ripple went through the room. The same gas station. The same incident. Matthew stepped forward. No notes. No lawyer whispering in his ear. Just a folded sheet of paper in one hand and tired eyes. My name's Matt, he said, voice steady. I was 2 pumps over when it happened. He held up the paper. I gave a statement that day, but I guess no one read it. He glanced toward the prosecutor, then to the jury, the guy who claimed he was threatened. The one who said this Marine told him he could shoot him from 800 yards. That guy was the one doing the yelling. He paused, voice tightening. He shoved Riggs first, called him a washed-up psycho, said people like him were dangerous. He shook his head. I saw the whole thing. Riggs didn't raise a hand, didn't even raise his voice. He looked at Daniel again. He just stood there, calm, quiet, like always. The general nodded. Thank you, Matthew. Then he faced the judge again. With your permission, Your Honor. I'd like to formally submit this revised testimony, along with a sworn affidavit from the gas station manager and security footage recovered yesterday. The judge nodded, stunned. Permission granted. The prosecutor's mouth opened, closed, opened again, but no words came. Because what could he say? The entire foundation of the case was gone, and in its place stood something stronger. The truth. But the general wasn't done. He stepped toward the jury, not too close, just far enough to be heard clearly. I know this trial was never meant to be about what happened in Fallujah, he said, but you can't separate a man from his service, and you shouldn't separate silence from dignity. He scanned their faces. You look at this man and see a threat because he doesn't talk, because he walks alone, because he wears old boots and doesn't smile when you pass him. He gestured toward Riggs. But I see the man who stayed behind in enemy fire so the rest of us could fly home. He stepped back, his voice lowered. You want to know what restraint looks like? He pointed at Daniel. It's that, and with that, the general turned, faced Riggs, and slowly, without flourish, he dropped to one knee, not in weakness, but in reverence, not for himself, but for a man who had once saved him, and now needed saving in return. You could feel it, the shift, like the air in the courtroom had thickened, grown heavier with every word that left the witness's mouth. Matthew Dunley's voice didn't tremble. It didn't need to. I saw the whole thing. He said again. The young man wasn't scared. He was angry. He puffed up, tried to pick a fight. Riggs never raised a hand. He paused, eyes scanning the jury. In fact, it was the young guy who stepped forward first. He bumped Riggs with his shoulder, then started taunting him. The courtroom held its breath. I leaned forward at my desk, pen frozen over my notepad. The judge, halfway through adjusting her glasses, never finished the motion. The line about 800 yards, Matthew continued. That didn't come from Riggs. It came from the kid mocking him, sarcastically. Trying to sound tough, he looked down briefly. I was standing close enough to hear the tone. It was mocking, not threatening. And Riggs, the judge, asked softly, did he say anything in response? Matthew shook his head, just looked at him, said, I'm done here, and walked away. That's when General Wyatt stepped forward again. If I may, Your Honor. The judge nodded. She didn't say yes. She just nodded, slowly, like her heart already knew what was coming. Wyatt turned to the bailiff, who handed him a flash drive. He plugged it into the courtroom monitor. A grainy video began playing. Gas station footage, wide angle, slight fisheye distortion, but clear enough. The young man, tan jacket, messy hair was right there. You could see him gesture aggressively, stepping in close, jabbing a finger. Riggs stood still, hands at his sides. No lunge, no threat, just stillness. The video had no sound, but it didn't need it. The body language was everything. At the end of the clip, Riggs turned his back and walked away. Back in the courtroom, no one moved. The prosecutor fumbled for words, but they didn't come. His notes sat limp in his hand. The jury sat frozen. One woman clutched the edge of her seat like it anchored her to the moment. And then Wyatt walked toward the defense table. Not with fanfare, not with formality, just purpose. When he reached Daniel Riggs, he stopped, for a breath, then two, and then he dropped to one knee. The courtroom didn't gasp. It didn't need to. Silence hit like thunder. I'm sorry, Wyatt said. Not loud, just clear. I'm sorry for today, for every day since Fallujah, For every sidewalk you were ignored on, every job you couldn't get, every whisper behind your back. For a country that's forgotten how to listen to its own defenders. He bowed his head. I'm sorry we didn't stand up for you sooner. And for the first time since that trial began, Daniel Riggs moved. Not a shift, not a blink. He stood, slowly, one hand resting lightly on the table for balance, the other reaching forward. He placed it gently on Wyatt's shoulder, not to stop him, not to lift him, just acknowledgement. Then, for the first time that day, maybe the first time in years, Daniel Riggs smiled. It wasn't wide, it wasn't showy, just a quiet curve of the lips, like a weight had finally been set down. The general looked up, and Riggs extended his hand. They shook old soldier to old soldier, brother to brother. The entire room froze. Not a camera flashed, not a foot shuffled. Even the judge had one hand pressed to her chest, the other gripping the bench for support. It was a sacred silence, the kind that doesn't come from shock, but from reverence, from finally seeing someone you should have seen long ago. And for one long, holy second, time paused. For Daniel Riggs, the judge didn't bang the gavel. She didn't need to. Her voice was steady, but softer now, like something inside her had changed. In light of new evidence, this court hereby dismisses all charges against Mr. Daniel Riggs. A pause. And on behalf of this bench, I offer a formal apology for the failure of due process. Her words landed not like verdicts, but like healing. Riggs didn't react, not with a smile, not with a nod. He simply turned his gaze forward, as if waiting for permission to leave a chapter behind. The bailiff stepped forward, keys in hand. The heavy chain around Riggs's waist fell away with a quiet clink. No one clapped. No one dared. Because this moment wasn't for applause. It was for acknowledgement. It was for grace. I stood behind my desk, hands trembling on the oak surface, watching a man walk free not just from chains, but from the weight of being misunderstood for too long. When Riggs turned toward the exit, every juror stood, one by one. No order, no signal, just respect. He passed the gallery, the reporters, the stunned prosecutor, the judge, and as the doors to the courtroom opened, there they were, dozens of them, lined along the steps outside. Old boots, faded caps, chestfuls of medals, or none at all. Veterans. They had come quietly, some from down the street, others from 3 towns over. Word had spread online after the first flash of a 4-star general at the courthouse. No one sent out a call, but somehow they all knew. This wasn't just another hearing. This was a reckoning. Riggs stepped outside, the cold air met him, but this time, it didn't bite, and the moment his foot hit the top step, every veteran there saluted in perfect unison. No commands, no ceremony, just silent, unshakable honor. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I felt my throat tighten, my chest burn. I had spent weeks thinking he was just another case file, just another old soldier who couldn't leave the war behind. But I was wrong so deeply, shamefully wrong. He wasn't a shadow. He was light just hidden beneath the weight of silence. And now, finally, we had stopped long enough to see it. Riggs walked slowly down the steps, not rushed, not hunched. He didn't wave, he didn't speak. But when he reached the sidewalk, he paused, turned slightly, and nodded. Once. That was enough. A quiet gesture that said, I see you too. Then he walked on, not alone. General Wyatt followed beside him. So did Matthew Dunley. And behind them, half a dozen veterans fell in step. No cameras, no parade, just footsteps. Purposeful, grounded. And for the first time since this trial began, I didn't feel like a clerk anymore. I felt like a witness to something sacred, something we almost missed. Because sometimes, heroes don't raise their voices, they carry their silence with dignity. And if the world's too noisy to hear them, then it's up to the rest of us to speak, to step forward, to say, "We remember." Daniel Riggs didn't need a speech. He didn't need a verdict to know who he was. But on that day, in that courtroom, the rest of us needed it. We needed to remember what sacrifice actually looks like. Not polished, not publicized, but quiet, worn into the boots of a man who walked alone for too long. That day, he walked out different, not because he changed, but because we finally saw him clearly. And maybe, just maybe, that's what justice really is. Not paperwork, not punishment, but recognition, truth, and the courage to say it out loud, even if it took 31 years, and a 4-star general to help us listen. Sometimes a man doesn't need a lawyer. Sometimes the truth finds its own voice. And when it does, the silence becomes a kind of anthem. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today, someone isn't going hungry. And sometimes, that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Grateful Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.